Hello and welcome to the Raw podcast brought to you by the Sunderland Echo. My name's James Copley and I'm joined today by my colleague Joe Nicholson. Joe, how are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. Sunderland won, England won. It was a pretty good weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah, decent indeed. We'll start with Sunderland, who beat Millwall 3-0 at the Stadium of Light. Pretty comprehensive in the end, Joe, but there were a few shaky moments maybe in the first half for Sunderland.
Yeah, it was a difficult watch at times, wasn't it, in the first half? I think Millwall, we kind of knew what to kind of expect from them. They're quite a physical side. I think they went quite direct at times, and Sunderland struggled to cope with that, especially coming off the back of 3 weeks off. Maybe there was a bit of rustiness there, but I thought second half they were really impressive. I thought they turned it on at the start, got that early goal with Ahmad, and then really kicked on from there. I thought they really controlled the game pretty well. There was more space in behind Millwall's back line, which they exploited, especially for the third goal when Ellis Sims went through and rounded the goalkeeper. And I thought it was just a really quite controlled performance in the second half. And you could maybe argue that 3-0 flattered them a little bit based on the first half performance, when I thought Millwall had some decent chances, particularly the one just before half time when Anthony Patterson gave the ball away. And Sunderland were quite fortunate there to kind of stay level at half time. But once they kind of got ahead at the start of the second half, I thought it was quite an impressive performance from the side in the end.
Indeed, 4 goals in 6 games for Amad Diallo. Now, I did think, Joe, that you touched upon it there, but the first half looked like two teams who had just had 3 weeks off and they were sort of feeling the way back into it. It felt a bit like the first half of the Coventry game, maybe slightly sort of slower pace, but Sunderland felt the way back into it, and it was great to get the win in the end. What are your thoughts on Ellis Sims's performance? For me, I think he's been outstanding recently since he came back into the side. He wasn't fully fit when he first came back in, thinking of the Luton game, and he came in for a bit of stick for maybe not working as hard as he should. For me, it was always clear that he wasn't fully fit and that he was sort of playing within himself, but just to give Tony Mowbray that option. I don't see this argument that he doesn't care and doesn't work hard. I don't understand how or what people are seeing in that regard. For me, I just don't see that. What are your opinions on Ellis Sims? Because I think he's good, and I think he worked really well and worked really hard for Sunderland against Millwall. I think he's a sort of modern striker in a sense that he doesn't waste anything. He doesn't chase down every ball, especially the pointless ones, which, you know, the pointless balls for a reason. I really like Ellis Sims, Joe. What's your opinion on him?
Yeah, I thought he played really well on Saturday. I think it was his third start in a row, wasn't it? He started the game at Birmingham. He started the game against Cardiff, where I think that was the one where he struggled, wasn't it? Where he kind of made his first start for a couple of months, and that was the one where he kind of struggled and maybe got a bit of criticism on the back of that. I think clearly he's a different kind of, his style's quite different to Ross Stewart, whereas Ross Stewart will chase a lot of balls into the channel. It looks like he's kind of busting a gut to kind of close everything down, whereas Sims is a bit more, he can be a bit more static at times, but sometimes that can be a good thing if he just holds his position and the chances kind of drop to him. I wouldn't call it kind of lazy or he's not working hard enough. I think he's still very effective with what he does, and I thought he had a tough kind of test in the first half against Millwall, against two kind of giant centre-backs in Jake Cooper and Charlie Cresswell, and I thought he coped with that pretty well. He didn't win every header or every duel that he went for, but he gave Sunderland that focal point that they've kind of lacked, particularly in recent weeks when they've not had a natural striker. I thought his hold-up play was pretty good. When he got the ball, he brought others into play. I thought the kind of flick on that he produced for the opening goal for Ahmad was pretty clever as well. Kind of drew a couple of men towards him and then opened that space at the back post for Ahmad. So I think just having that kind of natural striker there, that focal point, I thought that was, it was a big kind of help for Sunderland against Millwall. And Tony Mowbray is going to have a dilemma pretty soon because we think maybe Ross Stewart could be back for the West Brom game. I don't think there's any need to kind of start him with Sims now having 2 goals in 2 games. But is he going to play them both? Is he going to, like Alex Neil did at the start of the season, but that then meant a change of formation to kind of go to a back 3 and wing backs to fit them both in the side. You've got Ahmad playing exceptionally on one side. You've got Jack Clark's had a great season on the other side. You've got Pritchard was very good again on Saturday. So it's going to be a dilemma. How are you going to get both of them into the team, or will one of them play ahead of the other? So, but it's a nice dilemma for Mowbray, I think, to have, hopefully in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I think it was 4 points in 5 games when Sims was injured. Since his return, I think we've taken 10 from 5 games. And since his return, I don't think we've not scored without him being on the pitch. So I think for me, he's clear. His influence on the side is clear. Loads of positives though in that second half, Joe. We mentioned Sims, Ahmad, Pritchard looked sharp, but there was quality elsewhere. Alessi came back into the side and was good. In terms of injuries, Sunderland have Sirkin and Gooch back. Obviously, Sirkin didn't play. Ballard and Stewart still to come. That squad is looking good again. And, with January just around the corner, Sunderland 1 point off the playoffs. Interesting times at the moment.
Yeah, I think like the injured players coming back, they can almost be like new signings. I mean, well, they had Gooch back in yesterday. You had Sirkin was on the bench. You had Elise had come back, and then you've still got Stewart to come back. Sims
You have the likes of the Huggins
Ballard,
and Hume available
Huggins,
as well now. So there's
like
options now for Tony Mowbray. Yeah, 100%.
They're almost like new signings, and it will provide a lot of competition for places. We've already mentioned the kind of competition in that attacking area of the pitch, but Dennis Sirkin, I think, has had a very good season as well. He didn't get in the side on Saturday because Adji Elise was picked ahead of him, probably because Elise kind of has that bit more height, maybe from set pieces. We knew before the game that Millwall had scored the most set pieces in the divisions. I think Mowbray was quite wary of that and wanted to kind of have a bit more height in his back line with Elise just over Sirkin. So he kind of got the nod there, but that's good to have the competition there. And yeah, when you've got kind of Bailey Wright's going to come back from the World Cup, Jewison Bennett's going to come back from the World Cup, it's really positive. And to have a kind of fully fit squad at this stage, Edouard Michou as well is going to come back. So there is a lot of competition for places, and it does look very, very promising for Sunderland in the second half of the season. But we know every game's going to be tough.
Indeed, it's great for Sunderland to have those options and Tony Mowbray to have those options, given when he came to the club with the injuries to Ballard and Stewart, and Sirkin had injuries as well. Huggins was out, so it's definitely good. I want to touch on Danny Bart, who I thought was absolutely sensational. Saved a goal in the first half, has just been an absolute colossus this season. Probably Sunderland's player of the season, although I will admit there are a few in contention for that. And to think we signed him in League One, I think his second game, I think his first game was a win over Portsmouth. And if I'm not mistaken, his second game was the 6-0 defeat away at Bolton, which he scored a lovely own goal in. To come from that to where he is now has been brilliant. And I think he's actually one of the biggest success stories from this recruitment team, and actually a little bit of a nod to Lee Johnson as well, who was quite vocal in wanting to bring Bart to the club and pushing that deal through. He's been fantastic.
It kind of shows, doesn't it, that although Sunderland have kind of recruited for young, kind of up and coming players, that sometimes you just need that experienced guy that's been, well, he'd played a lot of games in the Championship. Sunderland managed to get him in League One. Similar with Corey Evans, similar with Alex Pritchard, players that have got that experience under their belt and are real leaders in the team. I think Danny Bart is one of the players that really leads by example in the dressing room, really sets the standards. And this season, we've really seen the best of him. I think he's the only outfield player that started every game. I think it's only him and Patterson have started every game. So that just shows kind of how big he's been. And I think he's formed quite a good partnership with Luke O'Nien as well at the back. I think Bart's kind of your big, strong guy there. He'll head things away, he'll intercept things, and O'Nien's maybe a bit better on the ball, can kind of step out with it. So I think they've formed a good partnership. And you mentioned Dan Ballard coming back. I think he will get back in the team, but it's kind of hard to see how he will at the minute, because I think those two have played pretty well. And yeah, as you said, I thought Bart was excellent on Saturday against Millwall in a real kind of, as we said, a physical test. Gary Rout, the Millwall manager, mentioned it afterwards as well, how good that Danny Bart was. He was saying it's pretty tough when his side have got a great record from set pieces, but when Danny Bart was winning everything, it was quite hard kind of for them to take advantage of their strengths. And as we said before, he's a leader in that team. He's been starting every game. He's managed to stay fit as well, because remember when he came in, he got an injury, and then he managed to get back into the side. So now he's up and running. He's had that run of games, and as I said, I think that we're now seeing the best of him.
Indeed, in that defence as well, alongside him, you've got Luke O'Nien and Lyndon Gooch, two players that I think most would have questioned their Championship credentials moving up from League One. a lot of people have come back to me and said, well, Gooch played in the Premier League and the Championship. He did. He debuted away against Manchester City, Pep Guardiola's first game. But he only played 11 games in that Premier League season. Sunderland were relegated. The season afterwards in the Championship was another catastrophic season. He had a couple of injuries. I think he only played 24 times, few of them off the bench. So he's been a League One attacker, Lyndon Gooch, for 4 years. Suddenly he's a right wing back or a right back. And I didn't think that he would step up as well as he has alongside Luke O'Nien, to be honest. I do get that Lyndon Gooch had some tricky moments in that first half against Millwall, but I thought he reacted well in the second half, and Sunderland were generally poor in that first half. But those are two players that have performed admirably, I think, since getting promoted, and have surprised me and a few others, I would suggest.
Yeah, I'd say maybe more so Gooch because he's playing at fullback, which maybe isn't his natural position. He's kind of naturally been more of a winger, hasn't he, or a number 10. He's kind of slotted into that fullback role, and as you said before, there are times when you can see that maybe it isn't his kind of natural position. But I think he has, overall, he's had a good season so far, and I think it's makes him stronger having him back in the side. He did improve in that second half, but he had some very good moments down the right. He assisted that goal for Pritchard, so. Yeah, I think he's having a good season. I think it's good to have him back. I think it's now good that there's that competition as well. With Try Hume came in the Birmingham game and did well, and you've got Huggins back as well. So hopefully those kind of three can provide competition for each other. With O'Nien as well, I think every time I've seen him, I think his best position is centre half. Although he played midfield at the end of last season, he's kind of slotted into that centre half role. And as I said before, I think he's had a good partnership with Danny Bart. You've got the one big strong guy in Bart who's will win headers and make interceptions, and O'Nien, although he can physically stand up to it as well, he can bring the ball out from the back. He maybe is a bit more mobile than Danny Bart, so I think they've formed a really good partnership, and that's why I said before I think it's going to be difficult to kind of throw Dan Ballard back into the team as kind of good as he looked in the first couple of games. You've got Elise as well, could maybe play in the left-sided centre-back role if Sunderland went to a back three. You've then got Bailey Wright to come back. So you've got quite a lot of competition at centre-back, really. And if Sunderland went to a back three, I don't know if they would do that maybe to match up the opposition. But I don't know, what would you say Sunderland's best centre-back partnership would be if they're all kind of fit?
Well, this leads me on nicely to what I was going to ask you next. Actually, we put a post out on the Echo social media accounts. What is Sunderland's best formation and starting 11 when everybody is fit? Obviously, sometimes, as you mentioned, you want to tailor it to the opposition, but I like Sunderland in a back four, so I've gone 4-2-3-1. This is everybody without injuries, and from what I've seen of them in a Sunderland shirt so far. So Patterson in goal, I would go Sirkin left back, Gooch right back, Alessi and Bath centre backs, Neil Evans is the centre midfielders. I would then have Clark, Pritchard, and Ahmad in behind Stewart. I think Ballard is the big one who misses out on that. Obviously, he's going to try and work himself into Sunderland's team. But I think from what I've seen of Elise and Bath, they've just been too good to sort of dislodge. But you could have Sirkin out and Alessi at the left back for extra height. You could play a back five. Ellis Sims would count himself unlucky to miss out on that team, given he's now Sunderland's joint highest goal scorer. You have Patrick Roberts kicking around as well, who Tony Mowbray is at pains to stress as one of the best players in the Championship. So that would be mine, although there's little asterisks all over the place, and Gooch could drop out for a specialist right back. Joe, what is your best formation start 11 when everyone's fit?
Yeah, something I've not really thought about. You put me on the spot here, but I think probably pretty similar to yours. I think probably sticking with the back four is kind of what they've had success with in kind of recent weeks.
It's nice that there's specialist players now at the club where you can switch between a back four and a back five, and we can do it sort of with ease, can't we? Because Alessi can fit in a left wing back or left back or centre back. Sirkin can play both. He can play centre back as well as left back and left wing back. Gooch on the right back, right wing back. O'Nien even can play right back or right centre back. It's it looks good in that department, and that's, as you said earlier, before Dan Ballard or Bailey Wright comes back.
Yeah, I think midfield, you've probably I think the best partnership there is Evans and Neil. I think most people would agree with that. A lot of the other players kind of coming through, Bar, Matete are still kind of. I think we're kind of still to see the best of them yet. Maybe in a couple of years' time. So I think kind of the Evans and Neil partnerships works quite well. I think Evans also brings the best out of Neil. So I think most people would put them two in midfield. At the back, I just think it's hard to break up Bart and 09 as a partnership. Although when Ballard is fit, you think he probably should be kind of one of the first choices. Definitely in pre-season, we were saying we think he's the first choice centre back, and then Danny Bart's gone on and had an excellent season. I think it's good they've had competition now at left back, because I think there's been far too much reliance on Dennis Sirkin since the start of last season. So now you've got Elise can play there as well. I think that's a big boost. Gooch probably is the first choice right back. Although Hume, I think I've been impressed with him when he has played the few times. And then up front, I just don't think you can drop Ahmad, can you? I mean, Mowbray mentioned it after the game. You've got Patrick Roberts sitting on the bench, but I think Mowbray used a term with all due respect. He said to Roberts that he's scored 2 great goals against Reading, but then I don't think he's scored since. And Ahmad has scored 4 in 6. He's on fire. So you can't drop him. Clark's had an excellent season, so I think probably there the 3 you'd have behind Stewart would be Clark, Pritchard, and Ahmad. Stewart, when he's fit, I don't think I've seen a better striker at this level. Really, it's hard to kind of pick one out. The way he started the season. So yeah, I think the side that you said, I think with a back 4, I think possibly is the strongest starting 11. But there are lots of different kind of variations that you could put in depending on who the opposition is, depending on who's fit. People are going to, like 09, for example, can move up to right back if he's needed. He can play at centre back, he can play at left back. So it's good to have those versatile players as well in the squad. But as we said before, it looks very kind of positive going forward into the second half of the season that Sunderland have a squad there where there's competition for places.
Absolutely. And you've actually written about this on the Echo today, which people can go and have a look at if they want. But it's 2 years to the day since Lee Johnson was appointed as Sunderland's manager, or head coach, I should say. You had a little look at his first ever starting 11, which came, I think it was it was at home against Wigan. Yeah, a 1-0 loss. I'll just read that out because it's actually pretty incredible where Sunderland have come from in 2 years. You had Lee Burge in goal, Conor McLaughlin, Bailey Wright, Tom Flanagan, and Denver Hume. A midfield 3 of Josh Scowen, Grant Ledbetter, and Max Power. You had Will Grigg up front, and he was flanked by Maguire and McGeady. The substitutes that day were Dobson, Sanderson, Embleton, Graham, Matthews, Diamond, and McFadzean. I mean, the change in makeup of that squad to now in terms of resale value, technical ability, quality is just crazy. The only players that I can see that are still here are Embleton and Bailey Wright. Yeah, they're the only 2. So they're a complete overhaul in 2 years. Sunderland have obviously got up the division, but the makeup of the player from then to now is startling, really.
Yeah, it's quite impressive how Sunderland have managed kind of the turnover of players to bring in a lot of young players with kind of now potential, as you said, resale value. And we had a look a couple of weeks ago of the signings that they've made. With it, I think you looked at one since Speakman had arrived, and then we did one as well since Stuart Harvey had come. And a lot of the signings have actually been a success. You'd say that they're kind of the signings could also get better as well. And you've got people like even Jack Clark, who's performing in the first team now. He's still only 21 years old, and people like Dennis Sirkin or Adjelise. So the turnaround that Sunderland have produced in terms of players has actually been pretty impressive in kind of this new structure that they've had since that game 2 years ago, which was Lee Johnson's first game. That was just before the takeover as well, wasn't it? And just before Speakman came in and before Stuart Harvey came in. So the recruitment model that they've kind of created and kind of the results that they've had with the signings they've made has been really good. You have to say, and it was quite surprising looking at that kind of side that played that day in December 2020 against Wigan, that there's only 2 players left in the squad. And as you said, I know they've gone up the division, so you would expect a lot of changes, I think, at the end of that season as well. A lot of players were out of contract as well. You had people like Ledbetter, Scowen, Maguire as well, were kind of all out of contract. So there was naturally going to be a turnover in the squad. But what Sunderland have kind of replaced those players with has been pretty good. And I think we've kind of seen that now. they went up a division, and now it looks like they could kick on again.
I think even in the transfer failures, I can sort of see the logic behind. I think that's what's quite pleasing for me. So people will point towards Frederick Alves, who came on loan from West Ham, didn't quite work out for him. Not sure that personality was a good fit with Lee Johnson and whatnot. It never quite kicked on, but on the face of it, clearly a talented player there. He was young. He was a big centre back. He was what we needed at the time, but for whatever reason, it just didn't work out. People point towards Michoud now, and I can certainly see the logic behind that deal, and hopefully that one works out. I think the big blot on the recruitment model has been actually when Sunderland deviated from it, and that was Jermaine Defoe, which just didn't work out in the end. But in the players that haven't worked out, apart from Defoe, I can actually see the logic behind most of them. I think, which is quite pleasing, because Sunderland for a long time it was a matter of who they could get, not sort of, or who would want to come, not who do we want to come, in my opinion.
I think there was a little bit towards the end of the transfer window, just gone, the summer one, when they kind of, I think the squad at the minute's got a lot of central midfielders, but we still haven't really got a kind of natural replacement for Corey Evans. So I think maybe you could argue they maybe got a bit carried away there. You mentioned the Michoud signing. We've still obviously not seen the best of him. Did they need, another player like that who's technically good on the ball, or should they have gone for someone who's kind of could be covered for Corey Evans? Could they have gone for another striker, for example? So there are kind of things that you could argue that maybe they could have done better, but I think that's naturally going to be the case with any kind of recruitment process over a long period of time. So, but clearly they're signing kind of talented footballers, very, signing Jewis and Bennett from Costa Rica and kind of picking that out. Not one that a lot of people would have picked out. So they've clearly got an eye for talent, and I think Elise and Sirkin are kind of the best examples of that. Players that we hadn't really heard of before they came to Sunderland. Obviously had a good reputation in academies in Premier League clubs. Ross Stewart is another one, or I think that came from someone that recommended him to Lee Johnson, wasn't it? The Stewart
it was,
one.
yeah.
Again, obviously a great find. So yeah, there's been some excellent signings kind of over the last kind of few transfer windows.
Yeah, it's interesting actually reflecting on Lee Johnson, because in terms of a recruiter and in terms of being able to spot players, I actually think he was very good. He was heavily involved in the Ross Stewart deal, heavily involved in the Danny Bart deal, and they've become two of Sunderland's good players. But obviously the problem was the streaky results, and when Sunderland tended to get beat under Lee Johnson, they really got beat under Lee Johnson, like Rotherham away, Sheffield Wednesday away, Bolton away. We're talking about transfers there, Joe, and you touched upon it. But for me, I think Sunderland really need to start looking at the striker situation. Obviously, Ellis Sims is just a loan deal, so you would presume he's going to go back to Everton next year. Could they get him back? Would he want to come back? Would the club want him back? We don't know, so that's up in the air. With Stewart, we know his contract has the option of another year in the summer. So he's going to be here, you would think, unless a big bid comes in from him and Sunderland sell him. Obviously, him signing a new deal is very much up in the air. So there's a possibility that Stewart could leave within the next 18 months to 2 years. So you would really want his replacement there, Joe, a bit like how Sunderland acted with Charlie Wyke and Ross Stewart. Ross Stewart was already at the club. And then for me, as you mentioned, like for like, in terms of a midfielder who can play the way and perform the role Corey Evans does, those two positions essential. And I think maybe some more experience in the squad as well would be good.
Yeah, I think they're the main two positions for me that I'd look at. Is the striker, I think, is obvious, with obviously only two in the squad, and we're still not sure what's going to happen with Stewart's situation. Sims as well is only on loan, so definitely that's something they need to address. Whether they bring in a kind of a younger player that can maybe be on the bench for kind of a season, half a season, and then kind of progress into a first team regular, because if you've got Sims and Stewart already there, we've already had the conversation that can you get both of them in the same side? It's going to be hard to sell to another player who wants to play first team football to come to Sunderland when you've already got these two guys that are playing well and will be expecting to start as well. So that'll be an interesting one, kind of how they approach that. And I suppose a lot of that will depend on what happens with Stewart. So, or whether they sign kind of an inside forward, someone that can play wide and can play up front as well. But then you've got a lot of competition out wide now as well, with Ahmad, Roberts, Clark, Embleton, Pritchard, kind of as those playmakers as well, Bennett. So there is competition already there for those attacking position. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach that in the transfer window. And then, as you said, the other position is that holding midfield kind of cover for Corey Evans. Sunderland have been quite fortunate really this season. Evans, I think he's only missed 2 games. One was for injury, one was for suspension. And we've seen when he comes out of the side that there is an imbalance to the team a lot of the side. So
and that's a big worry. A big worry with Corey Evans as well is that his injury record in the past at Blackburn towards his latter time there. Certainly the last 3 seasons he was there. I think he played 9 games in one of the seasons, 18 games in another. So although Sunderland have done really well and the medical team have done really well to get him fit and firing and playing every week, there is always that worry, isn't there?
Yeah, you just think if he had picked up an injury, say 3 games in, I think there'd have been a lot of problems there. But fortunately for them, they have been able to keep him fit. And then one position I kind of looked at the start was the fullback position. But I think now you've got Gooch, Hume, Huggins could all play right back. You've got Sirkin and you've got Elise has proved that he can play as a left back. So potentially they could look at signing another player there, but you have now got options there. And the other one I think we said in some was the goalkeeper. Did they need a more experienced keeper? Yeah. I think Anthony Patterson's. I think he's impressed this season. I think that decision's been justified to not bring in a more experienced guy and kind of back your homegrown goalkeeper. I know he gave the ball away on Saturday and could have been a costly mistake. But I think overall he's had a good season, and I think that decision has been justified rather than just going and bringing in someone more experienced and letting him sit on the bench. They've given him a chance, and I think he's taken it.
I think with Patterson, and I'm really enjoying his performance, there's obviously a few shaky moments against Millwall, but you're going to get that with a young goalkeeper who's only 22. I can't think of many 22-year-old goalkeepers that are playing to the level that he is in the Championship. I wouldn't mind a player coming in a bit like Steve Harper did with Jordan Pickford in the Premier League to be around the place and not necessarily to play. I know we've got Alex Bass as a backup as well, but just a good character, a bit like was it Andy Lonergan did for Liverpool and Everton, just to have that experience around and somebody maybe Patterson could learn off a bit, because Alex Bass is quite young as well. He's only 24.
24, yeah. And I think then the third choice keeper is Jacob Kearney, who probably needs a loan move in January. Yeah. He's kind of been one of the more impressive players on the 21s team, so he probably needs to go out on loan and get some kind of first team game time. So then, maybe like you said, you could bring in a more experienced goalkeeper who perhaps would be happy to kind of take a backseat role and not play. Because I mean, like in the summer they were linked with John Ruddy, but John Ruddy's obviously still got first team aspirations, gone to Birmingham, done very well. So it's very hard to bring someone like that in who wants to play without limiting kind of Patterson's game time.
Absolutely right. Well, we shall wrap it up there. Joe, I believe we'll try and get somebody from the West Brom end later on in the week for a little preview of that game. The Sunderland Echo are now on TikTok and YouTube. Just search us on those platforms and you'll find us. You can also visit the website. We're on Facebook and Twitter as well. And thank you once again for listening to the Raw Podcast.